Hello, my name is Christopher Scott from the Biblical Leadership blog at christopherscottblog.com. And this week I'm coming to you with a video about how to keep your volunteers by ensuring their own self-care. Right? So this is some of the material that I've taught for the Center for Nonprofit Management in Dallas and Fort Worth, where I'll spend a week talking about how to recruit volunteers, a week talking about how to keep volunteers, and a week talking about how to lead volunteers. And this is one of the things I talk about when we try to encourage volunteer leaders in churches and nonprofits to keep their volunteers, is that if you're going to have volunteers long term, you need to ensure their self-care. So there's three main areas that you're going to need to do that in. Number one is paid expenses. If your volunteers ever have to pay for things on their own, they're not going to stick around long term. They might, pay their own food money or pay their own training fees up front, things like that, but long term, it's not going to sustain themselves. So if volunteers ever need to drive somewhere as part of their work, you're going to need to reimburse their expenses. If volunteers spend a whole day volunteering at your organization, you're going to need to find a way to provide lunch for them or snacks for them or drinks for them if it's hot, things like that. If volunteers have to pay for parking just to come to your organization and park, that's not going to sustain itself long term. So the first area that you have to provide support for volunteers in to ensure their self-care is paid expenses. The second thing is physical stress. If you're giving volunteers work to do that's difficult to do physically, whether it's typing on a computer and not moving at all except for their fingers all day long, you got to make sure they take breaks, make sure they get up, make sure they go to the bathroom, make sure they get lunch and move around. Otherwise they're going to get carpal tunnel and tendonitis and other things like that. That's not going to be good for the volunteers. If they're doing more physical work, moving boxes or lifting things, operating machinery, you need to make sure that those people also get, number one, calories to work and keep their energy up. Number two, water to make sure they're hydrated and they don't get dehydrated. And three, make sure they take breaks. So first thing you need to do to ensure volunteers' self-care, number one is paid expenses. Number two is their physical health. Number three is emotional stress. So if you have volunteers that are working with women who have been affected by domestic abuse, or children that have been abandoned or taken away from their parents and put in the CPS system, whatever that might be, you need to work with volunteers and provide those volunteers ways they can cope with the emotional stress that they might experience as part of their volunteer experience. And that's going to be different. Maybe that's giving them time off. Say you volunteer 3 weeks a month, then we give you the fourth week off. Maybe it's just giving volunteers specific times so the volunteers can interact with other volunteers and cope and talk about their experiences. Maybe that's a special training, kind of an ongoing training you give, or you provide time for volunteers to update each other about what they're doing. That can look in a lot of different ways. So in order to keep your best volunteers, you need to ensure their self-care with emotional stress, physical stress, as well as their paid expenses that they might have. So my name is Christopher Scott from the Biblical Leadership blog. Pretty quick video this week trying to help you out as far as keeping the volunteers that you have. If you want to learn more about the Bible, leadership, and how to keep volunteers, you can visit my blog at christopherscottblog.com. Thanks again.